Thanks so much. It's day 4 now of our program, the Panoptic Garden. And to conclude Thursday's program, I'm delighted to introduce Anahita Mekanik, who's joined us from New York. She's an artist and scent designer. She is one half of Centronics with Frederik Duerinck. And she has a background in linguistics and mixed media, and she practices as an artist also. She has worked with some of the most well-known fragrance houses in the world globally, and she's also with Frederik, she's also part of the team behind Algorithmic Perfumery, which is how we actually met in New York. And I was very fascinated by this concept of uniting the concept of algorithms with scent and the history of scent and its connection to both the Islamic world but also Europe, and thinking about its migratory qualities, because scent travels the same way in which people and ideas do. So I was very fortunate to encounter their work. And Anahita will be presenting, and she's also part of our delegation and public program, in which she has been tasked with designing a scent for the Panoptic Garden. So through the course of this week, we have been visiting various sites across Venice, looking at both natural elements as well as artificial, and thinking how we can create some sort of confluence of these ideas to create a specific scent that sort of unites this idea of olfactory with algorithms. So Anahita, it's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me. And it's a hard act to follow after Matteo. But I think what we're doing here is a convergence of many things beyond algorithms and poetry. So I'm happy to kick it off with a little bit of why it's so wonderful to do this as part of the Panoptic Garden program. Perfumery has its roots also in the garden. And from the seeds to the blooms to the fruits to decay, the garden mirrors the moments of our life. And Juhani Palasma, with whom I had the opportunity to also work, who's an incredible architect, Finnish architect, I think says it beautifully when he says the nose makes the eyes remember. And that's the untapped potential of scent. That's its potency at its core to make us travel in time and space, which with the supremacy of vision is often a bit forgotten. So a little bit about me. I have a somewhat non-linear path. I am Persian, Iranian of birth. I grew up in Paris, and I've been a New Yorker for over 20 years. And I've had a dual path of my mixed media practice, which I came to thanks to New York at the Art Student League with under Leonid Lerman, who has been a great inspiration. And this is a little bit an example of the kind of work that I do. So primarily mixed media and three-dimensional pieces, assemblages, working mostly with found objects and objects that are also extremely personal. This dress belonged to my grandmother. That's the dictionary you see on the ground, or pages from her Farsi English dictionary from back in the 50s when she was learning how to speak English. And most of the examples are how a woman should behave when she, for example, goes to a restaurant and shouldn't order or speak to the waiter directly. So very personal pieces which touch on questions of identity and, as someone who's been unrooted and in exile, and just sort of, the process of integration and transformation that comes from, the new cultures that you're exposed to, the new codes of behavior that you adopt. This piece is Deliverance from 2014. So my personal practice is very analog, quite far from algorithms, as I had not imagined. And I've also had, so as I said, a dual path of being a scent designer and working with perfumers to create, the invisible sculptures that, perfumes and scents are. So really going from a very visual form of poetry to really the most invisible, I would say, one of the most, the most invisible mediums. And, the task for us as scent designers is to really articulate the invisible, to understand it, to translate it, ideas, emotions, concepts into a universal language, because when it comes to scent, we don't really grow up learning how to communicate about it. It's so subjective, it's so connected to our personal associations. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. So it's just to sort of highlight the limits of language when it comes to talking about scent, with language and what we want to share.
Do you see it as obviously it is a language of sorts. It's not one that relies on a lexicon of words.
Yeah. For me, it's truly a universal language, and you see that there's a lot more cohesiveness when people actually talk through scent than sometimes just words and all the meanings that we associate to them. Just a little bit maybe about our sense of smell, which you might probably already know as well. But this is Andreas Keller. If you're interested in scent, I invite you to look at his work. He's academic, and he's written a book on the I'm blanking out. Sorry, I don't want to misrepresent it. The philosophy of olfactory perception, and he's a great pioneer in many of our understandings around scent. And the genetic variation in human odor and receptors alters our odor perception, meaning that out of all the receptors that we have, 2/3 we share in common, and 1/3 we don't. And I think we don't even actually quite know what they bind to. So I loved it when he said that, we all smell the world with a different nose. And right there starts a lot of debate, a lot of exchange, because no two people will smell the same thing. And what I love in sort of what I do is that scent becomes such a conversation opener. And because of really the olfactory bulb being this incredible extension of the brain almost into the physical, which none of the other senses have, with the molecules that the odor that is released and our receptors basically connecting and then translating what the smell is. It's really the brain out, reaching out into the physical world, which is a pretty crazy function, when you think about it in those terms. Hence the visceral, primal relationship that we have to scent, and all the ways in which we don't necessarily control our reaction to scent, and sometimes the people that we might even be attracted to or not, for that matter. Origins of scent, from early biblical markets to the rise of the incense root, the Silk Road, and to modern perfumery, scent has been part of our lives, and I would say our collective knowledge and consciousness for a number of years. In Egyptian times, as a gift to the gods, as a medium to enter other realms. Then a little bit becoming already more of a luxury product with the perfume oils that were used in rituals, and as well, of course, the use of incense in spiritual ceremonies. I'm going to go maybe a little bit closer to of course, actually, let me just highlight, we went to the Museum of the Plague yesterday, and as they mentioned also during the plague, it was used by pharmacists, a blend of vinegar and some aromatic herbs to cleanse and disinfect the air from the disease. So, scent has had this spiritual, this functional, medicinal, hygienic role, all the way to this, act of beautification, and sadly, maybe a little bit, scent as we know it in more modern times, kind of modern perfumery, of which I've been a member. Sort of, commoditizing scent and reducing it to just a medium of attraction. Often people say, jokingly that, perfume is just about sex, and that's really, the common denominator to a lot of these advertisements that you see. It's just, a tool of attraction. But I think we're going towards the higher power of scent again. There is a return to aromatherapy, all the effect it can have on your mood. And in the future, there's also a lot of work that's being done around more intelligent scents. So meaning from the ingredient, when we start having information about how you physiologically react to a scent, and in ways that are really captured, then we can start designing scents that might truly help you maybe sleep better, focus if you're want to relax. And I think that's kind of not just me. Most of the people looking at the future of scent also see that as a really exciting development.
Thank you.
And so, how does algorithmic perfumery, fall into this tradition? A little bit inspired by everything we saw this week up to this date. I think it's always been there for me, but I truly see more of a futuristic nomadic garden. So this is our sensory machine, and the sound might not be very great, but basically what you see here is a scent that's being created in real time. Each of those dispensers contains what we refer to as a building block, a chord in music, an accord in French, which is already a mini composition in itself. So some of those dispensers might have an accord that has only maybe 2 single raw materials. Some might have 20, depending on the complexity of the olfactory profile. And basically what we did is curate a palette of building blocks that mimics the organ of a modern perfumer. So we use ingredients that are both naturals, synthetic artificial, synthetic man-made.
Could you speak, Anahita, about the process of how you arrived to that, please?
So that's exactly where thank you for bringing me back to the genesis. So algorithmic perfumery was born out of a future sketching exercise with the mandate to reimagine a little bit our interaction with scent. The initiative was called Avant-Garden, and it was commissioned by the large corporation where I used to work, which is called IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances. And the framework of the initiative was really fascinating. We thought if we bring perfumers together with scientists, and scientists in the broad sense of the term, so anywhere from a psychiatrist to an anthropologist, to a musician, to a linguist, through very open-ended conversations, they would touch on themes that, again, like I was saying earlier, are not really the main point of focus of perfumery today. And in that process is how I met Frederik. So maybe visualize a little bit, but we'll come back to that. I just want to show him to you. So Frederik Duerinck is an artist, a technologist, and he was invited into this initiative. And with his arrival, the conversations sort of went to the next level. The first idea, the first proof of concept, was called actually Algorithmic Beauty. This was one of the first sketches for it. And this was a conversation between a perfumer, whose name is Pascal Gorin, and Florian Hecker, sound composer. And the topic was really about artificial sound, artificial scent, and questions of modernity, new standards of beauty. And the conversation, I know this is being taped, but it's okay. I'm not saying anything bad. They both probably know it. It was a difficult conversation because their practice was very different. One very much rooted, in the practice of perfumery, very close to how every little step, and another who was much more comfortable with, generated sound bites and a little bit more of a distance relationship, let's say, to his creative process. And it's during a brainstorming where we were really struggling to see what was the theme coming, out of this conversation, that Frederik kind of had this aha moment and was like, this is about generative scent design, and started sketching, what you see here. So the first machine, what it did, and this is maybe 5 months later from the sketch to reality, Algorithmic Beauty was a generative design system with synthetic sound and scents, and what it did basically was create unique compositions that lasted anywhere from 30 seconds to 1 minute. There were about 450 sound bites in terms of the input, and it would just create this very surreal, otherworldly soundscapes. And as a viewer, if you liked what you were hearing, then it could be translated into into scent, and then the bottle would drop, and then you would get. So it was more of maybe almost like a synesthesia type of experience. There was no direct connection of the human to this system at that point. We, or I in particular, because I acted as a bit of a docent while this avant-garde was going on and many people got to see it, it was a pretty much unanimous reaction to the machine. You know, it tapped into the awe of how things are created, the whimsy, the not knowing. So we knew that there was something really special there. And Frederik and I took a leap of faith. So, well, it's been already almost 4 years. And we decided to take this to the next level. And all that was born out of this, artistic, future thinking exercise, we wanted to, help it materialize its full potential, and also that it would be something that is sustainable and not just a sketch or an idea or something that was anecdotal. And in that spirit, it becomes a commentary on also a whole industry, of which I came, and and how it's going and the way it's going. So it's it's been a really fascinating journey. And human agency is at the core of sort of our ethos. And the way in which we mean that, the simple question was, what if everyone could create their own scent? You know best what you like. You don't need a tastemaker to tell you, you pick it up, you don't like it, you're not going to wear it. So, it was really about allowing anyone and everyone to be part of a creative process of a medium that is still not very accessible and easy to understand. And from there came this vision of a platform that could connect humans around the world through the medium of scent, which is a bit our longer term hope and path. So we are this sort of a hybrid tech, art, science, technology, and to be sustainable, more commerce at large, which where we'll be getting to. So that's what we are, and our path to this has been really, in terms of the technology. So Centronics is behind the technology that was created. We've done everything in-house. The machines are made in-house. The web app where you connect to the experience. So in many ways, we describe it as the most intimate connection to scent through this digitally managed and fully integrated, custom hardware, software, AI-based system that enables users to create scent based on their personality and preferences.
So you included obviously a quite lengthy questionnaire,
yes,
which I had to take as well in order to arrive at the scent. And there were a variety of questions. In total, I think, maybe because we were speaking for so long, it took 45 minutes, I think. Roughly.
Well, that was because of the talking, I think. It's really fascinating because the onboarding and the mediation is really this questionnaire. And there's many questionnaires. We talked earlier about, the horoscope.
The data set.
The data set. So that's really the input that we use. And so because our path has been to test an art and design festival with an audience of, people who are more open, who have more time, we cast a much broader net. So in the beginning, we asked even more questions, and we've sort of reduced it. And, I humbly say, this is a very tall order to figure out why anyone loves what they love when it comes to scent. So, we're humbly embarked on this path, and, with time and as we get more feedback to really understand, what are the patterns? Are there, patterns that are conclusive and ways in which we can predict what someone might like? But there's about probably 180 questions now.
180
and
questions.
It takes about maybe 10 minutes. Sorry, what I started to say is that the questionnaire is fascinating because it also is already a bit of a filter of how you operate. Mm-hmm. People who agonize over the answers will probably spend 20 to 25 minutes, and they'll ask their neighbor, do you think I'm like this or like that? And it becomes a fascinating thing. And people who are more decisive can get through it probably in 10 minutes.
And so how much of that relied on speculative sort of thinking from you? Because obviously you have questions, and I remember there was some where you have a sliding scale.
Yeah.
So do you prefer evening or morning was one I remember.
Yeah.
And so you could be somewhere in between.
Yeah. So, a lot of it, of course, started being speculative. We start seeing certain things, and then, sometimes we start thinking, oh, we're onto something, and then we're proven no.
Those patterns reoccur.
They recur, and then they end up not being consistent. There's, of course, the system had to learn from something. So there's also, bias, but you have to start somewhere. There's also, of course, human input. And I work with, with a team of perfumers and other scent developers, looking at, everything that's, pretty much been out there. And, the machine doesn't understand perception. It doesn't know what a human might perceive as good or bad. And of course, our evaluation of scent is often, I don't like, right? The in-between, and I think we were talking about that, I remember earlier, is a little bit more gray usually.
How much of that did you have to skewer or manipulate in order to get to the data that you really, to get to the heart of the data that you really needed to extract?
So I don't know if the word is manipulate, but we definitely had to do, and I know there's some things I can share and some.
Or rather orient.
Yeah, of course. So, this experience is also meant, at least in the starting point, as an enabler, like we're using technology to help people get a head start with a practice and a craft which is quite complicated. So we didn't want to alienate anyone and, make them run the other way. So yes, there's definitely work that was done, around the limits of harmony, but also disharmonic, because stylistically you can go many ways. Mm-hmm. You can have contemporary structures, you can have more classic structures, like any other art form. Scent also has its schools and lineages when it comes to, creations of the past. And it's it's a rather evolutionary practice. Very much like music. So once you start really getting into scent, and I remember in my beginnings it was very difficult when I was training with a master perfumer, and I was too lucky too soon, smelling all the classics, and then when she would say, so this one, as you can see, takes that one and puts that and that together, and I was like, I'm blind, I can't see. I really had a really hard time visualizing the scents. And it's only with, experience and practicing that then you start seeing these affiliations that can happen among them. And that's a little bit also what happens, in the contemporary market. There's a lot of, so it's rare that you really get something revolutionary, which is part of our interest with the AI, to go also to territories that are very much uncharted, because there can be a little bit of, same spaces that you typically see. So these are just a little bit the different, our nomadic garden machine, the different places that it's been. So currently it's in Dubai at the Museum of the Future. So it's going to be there for a while. This was during Chirotronica in Cairo, which was also a fascinating experience. This was in Hong Kong. And this was already a while ago at Ars Electronica. So I was inspired by what you were saying earlier. The machine is very much, I would say, at the forefront of what we do, and it's very much an attraction. But what I love about this medium and why I've come to it is, of course, the poetry of it, and all the metaphors of the garden and as a source. And what I envision ultimately with this machine is that it becomes a source of knowledge of what has come before in terms of creations and what can come, a sort of a fountain, if you will, a universal fountain of creation for scent, which I think has many interesting also implications from a scent conservation, scent preservation, to have this sort of entity where all these different, inputs from a creative perspective are also kept. Which, we're far from that, but that's, something which is also, I think, on the horizon.
So this is some field research.
Yeah, so this is very contextual. This was when did we go to the museum? The plague, it was yesterday. Yeah. So this was, a lovely moment we all had, and I think everybody, of course, was attracted to the lavender and picked a little piece of it. And I'm going to show you a little bit, maybe we're going to get maybe a little bit into the experiential side of this. So for example, yesterday, through that inspiration and some of the other things that we've been doing together, how we can already take it into, materializing some of those emotions. And so, this hybrid platform is a creation tool, and that's what I'm going to take you inside now. And of course, it's also a mini factory and a real-time mini factory. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go into so now I'm taking you a little bit behind the scenes. we're going into our back-end creation platform that we also use, not always with the AI. And I had started doing a, oops, that wasn't where I wanted to go. I had started doing a draft. Okay, we're going to do it live. Okay, we're going to create something new then. That's all right. So we're going to do, what should we call it in this moment? Maybe it's going to be the Panoptic Garden draft one. I'm going to drop it at our machine in the Netherlands, which is where our technical team and kind of our home turf is. And what I had started feeling that, so right now I'm kind of playing around a little bit. I'm going more by association. And, you know, we've been surrounded by a lot of water, so I would play with kind of with our marine note. I wanted to also play, we have this very beautiful kind of interesting accord, which is the rice and milk. A little bit because of the universal representation of rice and some of the countries and the convergence of cultures that we've talked about and the meaning of rice in those cultures. And I think also milk, only also because of the theme of the Biennale this year. I was also thinking, because we spoke a little bit about, you know, the wet and the dry. So there is a note that, a molecule that for me really gives me the texture of sand, and it's called cashmeran. It almost has this dry, salty quality that I associate with sand. So I'm going to add it here, and it's in our blonde woods.
Blonde.
And without my glasses, of course, I'm blind, so forgive me. Okay, now we're going to have to start putting some ratios here. This one, I think we can go a little bit higher.
You can make it larger, Anahita, with
pressing the
green.
There we go. Thank you, Sarah. Then it's very small for me, but that's okay. I'll try to find my way.
Too small?
Yeah, we wanted to also add a little bit of all the spices and our chai spices. So we have, you know, the cinnamon and all the things that one might imagine.
So the Silk Road.
The Silk Road, that would be my inspiration for going there. And then there was also a little bit, I think, we smelled quite a few beautiful roses this morning at the monastery. So I'm going to add a little bit of the rose that we have. So right now I'm playing, but at the same time, I kind of know that these things could kind of work well together. And then I'm going to just go back to our original starting point, which was a little bit the lavender. And I'm going to put a little bit of our lavender, which is here. If I can find it. Okay. Sorry. If anyone sees it, there we go, there we go. So the herbs is a blend of actually lavender and rosemary, which we also smelled quite extensively. So right now I'm just playing around a little bit. I'm gonna save it, and it's gonna normalize it for me. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to drop it real time, and we're going to have, unfortunately we don't have a machine here, otherwise we could have smelled it all at the same time. Emma, je vais produire l'échantillon, si tu peux... OK. Ouais, je vais te donner le numéro, mais ne l'entre pas encore. Donc, on est bien sur le 48A. And your order number is going to be 91543. Okay. Yeah, give me 1 second. Okay, it's a bit of a test here right now, in real time. Okay. Okay, Amana, you're live in Venice.
Put the closed captions on.
Okay, so she's going to, so here's the machine that we have in Breda, and so the production code that I just gave her, she's going to enter it, and we're going to see the real-time production of our first draft. So there we go, Panoptic Garden Draft 1. So what starts being really fun is that, you know, if you have a machine here, you have another machine in New York, Dubai, wherever, I can pretty much now drop them all around the world. And we can have a bunch of people, you know, having this sort of shared moment together, discovering what we're doing all together and sort of start a conversation. And I think that's where, you know, the platform starts really being fascinating, interesting. To start these sort of exchanges between people, the formulas that are being created, and all the different ways in which you can imagine we can have, you know, interactions around scent that are created. I'm not sure if we want to continue to the end, but maybe we do.
We'd like to see it.
Okay, we like, because we'll see the look on Emma's face also. That would be telling. So, you know, it's both a creative tool. It can also be an incredible fast prototyping tool where you just want to ideate very quickly around themes that you're curious about. And for those of you who'd like to do the experience, like what your point of discovery and introduction to the platform, you just can go to everyhuman.com. You can play, you can do the questionnaire, you can do it also for someone else. You'll see there'll be 3 suggestions created for you, because we're not that smart yet.
Can a group of people do it together?
So we haven't, we've spec'd kind of ways to do that, but we haven't we haven't featured that yet. But we've had people who've done the questionnaire as a sort of group effort. That's sort of the fun part of it, is that it really allows people to kind of connect in ways that typically they might not. Just around scent and what it evokes for them. So that's the car wash action, putting the label, and all of that is now automated. And in the beginning, I don't think we realized how much work this would be. But every step of the way, if we wanted to have full control over the technology stack, over what we're learning. We sort of needed to do that, so it just became a more and more complex and layered entity. Okay, so Emma, tu m'entends? Okay, great. Can you? Created by can you smell it and just give us a
visual.
Yeah, can you smell it? I'm going to tell her to smell it.
So once this is actually finalized, when you have fulfilled the residency, and you will create this, how will general public, will it be the Panoptic Guardian that they will then be able to source?
I think we can talk about it, because I could see one version being very much, yes, making it accessible to everyone, which is sort of the philosophy of this platform, where we're not about exclusivity, quite the contrary. But I can also see it being a bit of being connected to more of a ritual. So I actually have 2 ideas of how we would go about it. One very easily diffused, and one which is maybe a bit more part of a ritual around scent.
Did she do something?
No, I think she's having trouble.
The connection. Okay, let's open it up to our audience. Andreas, did you have a question first?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I remember you telling me about having created a perfume and that it somehow resonated with some kind of sense from your past. So, yeah, was it just solely based on the questionnaire, or how, and what was the result? That maybe you can reveal it if it's not too personal. So I found it very fascinating, the story.
May I? Yes. So, Anahita, when I first did the questionnaire, obviously it asks where you grew up. Did you grow up in the city or in the countryside? It asks so many different questions. So sort of, without being intrusive, is creating a personality and a sort of biography, if you like, and a personality. So I put all of this in. It doesn't ask which part of the hemisphere you have lived in, but it alludes to it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
By time zones and other questions that point towards it.
Yeah.
So the 3 scents that came, one of them was very grassy, and I lived between London and Surrey when I was a child, which is a little bit on the periphery of London. It's like a little bit countryside, but we also we had a house in London as well, so we went back and forth. But it had that kind of very grassy. Other one smelled like my grandmother. And my grandmother was Persian, so it had a scent of rose, but it had a connotation with certain part of the Persian calendar where more religious rituals happen, where rose water is used quite frequently, especially during like period of mourning. And so I was really shocked because it reminded me immediately of her, and she's been deceased for a number of years. So there was that, and then there was other that was a little bit stronger, because we're not flat as human beings. We have different dimensions. We're three-dimensional beings. Therefore, one of the scent was a little bit more strong, I would say, a bit more musky, and it had like oud and other sort of textures, scents in terms of scent, which sort of did give a different dimension as well. So I found that it did capture both, it captured nostalgia, it captured something a little bit more fresh, and then it also captured something that was a little bit more sensual, something a little bit more, stronger as well. So I found that very, very interesting.
And I wish I could say it's always like that. It is a bit of a black box. So I'd be lying if I said, well, yes, we figured you out. We'd need to ask you a million questions to arrive to that. But I think what it touches on, kind of connecting back to your question, is that there's a very exploratory nature to this, because you're basically suggested with 3 interpretations from your data. And what fascinates me is that sometimes people, they might not even like what they got, but they still sort of for themselves understand why they got it. And it opens up, and then sometimes they might force themselves to even wear it. And we have a very kind of good relationship with people who've done the experience, so we get a lot of feedback. And they might, write back and say, it was really difficult, but I, kept wearing it, and now I've come to love it, which is a hard thing usually in scent, because we're quite, yes, no. The experience that I think we might have talked about was actually before I got even involved in this. It was one of the first times that I was working on a scent, and the practice usually is when you're in development, you're smelling different variations on your arm, and their perfumers smelling you, and you're smelling others. So one day after the end of the day, I went home, and I was walking down Fifth Avenue, and for a second I thought someone that was very dear to me that I had lost touch with just walked by. So I was really looking around, and of course no one was there. And I realized it was the combination of the smells on my arms that had just taken me to that person, back in time, back in space. And that's sort of where I think my love affair with scent started. Not necessarily as a user of perfume, but as a medium that's just so powerful, and the memory, and it's a true time machine. So I think that's what I loved about it. And I fell into it a little bit accidentally, but that recognition of memory, I think, is also what connected me back as well to, being from Iran. Not that we're all, perfumers, far from it. And I'm a scent designer, not a perfumer. But I think flowers and spices are very familiar, they're part of our life. So arriving to yet another new city in New York, it just felt very like I had found a home. And that's how it's kind of felt since then. So, yeah.
I don't know if I can share a very quick story, and then we can open up to the questions. I mean, I had very strange kind of chemistry with Venice when I first came here, and I felt like super ecstatic, and I thought for a while, why was that? And there are these algae that actually some would define that they smell, but that strangely enough were something that I really liked. And then some years later I read this Russian poet Brodsky, who wrote this beautiful book, Fondamenta degli Incurabili. I don't remember now the English title, and he was saying that the algae in the winter, when they get frozen, they smell like the Baltic Sea. So that's where it comes from. So then I got it. I said, okay, so this was exactly something, because I was kind of obsessed, to go by this fundamenta.
You didn't know why, yeah.
Yeah, and this is,
yeah.
and then I discovered that. So yeah, it's a very strong dimension that somehow, or what you described, like when is somewhere stored in your memory and can bring you back to some kind of state of, and that's why probably I stayed here for a very long period. Okay, so I would open up to some questions, can't we? Yeah. So any comments?
Oh, no, not Anton.
I had a question about, I guess, the algorithm or the combination of individual scents. And based on the questionnaire, can someone skew it so much that it produces a scent that is not appealing? Or is there some sort of fail-safe against that for I mean...
Yeah. I can't fully answer your question, but I'll tell you a little bit from experience. There's probably more chances of you messing it up once you actually, so after phase 1, which is you did the questionnaire, here are the 3, interpretation suggestions, then you can actually have access to your formula and play for yourself. And then you take matters in your own hand. And it really then becomes, exchange man and machine, and I have ideas about what I think I might like, and let me see how that... In that moment, a lot of things can probably go wrong more easily because, you just don't know. The way it has been trained can obviously give things that will be not appealing to you. But that's also the subjectivity. You might not like it, but someone else will, which is why it also makes this kind of very difficult, because it's really about matching the creation, the creation to the right persona. That creation, someone might love it, but if we don't manage to create it for the right person, then it's lost. You can try to skew it, but I'll be honest, I've tried many times, and it's a bit of a black box. I'm not sure I would say, yes, if you do that, you're going to get that. And that's the part where I was saying, sometimes you get excited because we're like, and then it's like, oh gosh, no. So it's, we've had interactions with some over 30,000 plus people now, which is, I guess a small set still, relatively speaking. And we thrive really on the feedback loop. After you've gotten what you got, we ask you a lot of questions. Part of those questions, of course, to see if, it's a good match. But we're also trying to understand the perception of language. Because we also ask you words of, do you like this or that, to really understand, you think you like this, but then in reality, not really. And what means sweet to you means, something entirely different to someone else. So there's, both a learning on the perception of language and also really what, between what you said and what you got, if there was how big was that gap.
And I think it was also interesting that you were saying that some people didn't initially like the scent that they were given, but then it grew on them, and I think that's interesting coming from...
But I think that's true in many categories in life. There's a lot of things are... a lot of things are orchestrated so that we like them, like taste, There's all these, focus groups and panels that happen to make sure that it's not too much like this, So there's this sort of safe zone that we're being fed on a number of products, and scent certainly is no different. And of course, then there's, your body, the acidity of your skin, etc., that can have an impact. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great presentation. And one of the stories actually I got to experience, I got to see the machine in Dresden,
yeah.
in the fall. And as we were speaking with Anahita, we realized that it was kind of her project. So I find it very interesting. So I have more of a comment that Matteo was talking about, that algorithm is incapable of a metaphor. And I think this project exactly defies it wrong, because of course it is a metaphor through different senses. And another kind of idea that I had, which might be kind of obvious, if AI filled out the questionnaire, what would be the scent for the AI?
So it's funny because we did a project actually. So Andreas Keller, whom I mentioned earlier, has an art gallery, olfactory art gallery in New York, and there he did an exhibition which was called 10 Encounters, and one of the smells, we were tasked to do the smell between the last human and AI. So before the last human either died or left, planet Earth, what would that be? And it was more of a conceptual practice, that one. And we figured, the AI is going to keep doing iterations, because basically it's going to create endlessly, but it needs a human to give it feedback. And if there's no human left, it's basically going to be lost in a loop of just creating, awaiting its, I don't want to call it master, but yes, master, to say, you did good or bad. And that's sort of how that concept went. So we just showed one of the very many trials that could have been the answer, but not the only answer.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for your talk. It was really interesting to hear about it after we were sort of talking a little bit about it the other day. And I just sort of wanted to ask something which was from a conversation we were having the other day, where I was sort of talking about how I found this quite interesting, this algorithmic smell, because live coding is something that I'm interested in, something that working with sound or music or sometimes visuals algorithmically. It kind of gave me this interesting idea of like, treating smell and scent in the same way, and like kind of like using it as a performance tool. And then I sort of asked you if it was interesting to see the project you did with Florian Hecker, but I sort of also just wanted to ask the question I was asking the other day, which was, are you excited or interested or wanting to pursue anything kind of related to storytelling, like in a sort of live setting?
Absolutely. And Frederik, who's, through our encounter, the space opened up literally for this to be born, but he's very much the father of the idea. And he's a filmmaker, documentary maker, and a storyteller. So there's so many avenues that we would love to explore, to work with other artists. I think we also touched on that every scent that is created also has its unique character, which is also generated. And there in itself, there's so many other ways which we could go about it. It's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. And of course, text and, script and words and, yeah. We sort of entered through this door, but yeah, I think there's many ways to integrate other input that would be fascinating, yeah.
And I was wondering about other artistic practices that involve scent. I remember there was an Italian pavilion actually quite a few years ago, and there was a work by Luca Vittone, who is an Italian artist, and he reproduced a very strange smell, which was that of the Ethernet, which was all the work about the factory where this was produced, and it was kind of very weird kind of perfume that he diffused in all of the pavilion. And do you know other artists, or are you planning to collaborate with other artists?
Yes, I mean, over there's definitely
idiom?
been a rise in scent being incorporated in artworks and olfactory art. And even when I was working more with on commercial projects, because of just my practice and my interest, early artists to scent that would come to these big companies, knock on the door and be like, can you create a scent for my project, would usually be sent my way. And of course, I tried to help as many as I could. So yeah, there were a number of projects from the past. Miriam Simon did a really beautiful project, which is called the Agalanis flower, which was a species that's basically dying. And, so there was a whole ritual, and it was first performed at the MAD between capturing the scent through headspace technology, and, there was a performance art. So she's done some interesting things. Cicel Tolas is a pioneer, and probably for many the mother of many olfactory artworks. Peter de Cooper. I mean, there's. I can send a whole list actually if you're interested. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting others. And yeah, we would love to collaborate. And I'm actually also collaborating again with another artist that I had collaborated with in the past. Her name is Dimut Striebe. She's German. And we had done, she had done a project around Joseph Beuys. And we did a really fun reenactment of one of his performances through scent, and she's talking with us to work on something else.
There's one last question. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's both a comment and a question. I think one of the most beautiful things about this project is that paradoxically it's about machines and algorithms, but it's about being more human and being more in the world and being attentive to the world. Paradoxically in our material world we have our 5 senses, but we kind of abandon them. We don't really use them during our daily lives. And I was wondering if for people who used this machine, who produced their own perfumes, did their perception of the scents changed? Did they become more attentive to scents? And
I think what I've observed is, people who love it, who see it and understand how much they can play with the medium, of course, it's a no-brainer for those people. You just let them play and they're there for hours. People who come to it because they were attracted by the machine, they couldn't care less about perfumery, but who do the experience also end up really kind of stepping into it, because then like you're saying, it's just such a familiar thing. So, they're not necessarily looking at it as sometimes a perfume I might wear. It's just, again, going back to this conversation that they start having with themselves and, what this smell brings up for them. And one recent instance that happened was someone who did the experience, and after he smelled the second one, he was speechless. And I wasn't quite sure if, he hated it, or I wasn't quite sure what was going on. And then he wrote on his blotter, the smelling, that it was the smell of his father after he had, smoked. I don't remember the specifics. And his father had passed away 6 months earlier. So here was this man with a group of people doing something which seemed very mundane. We're going to do this fun experience. And then, half an hour into it, he was speechless and so moved that, he couldn't really partake in the conversation for a little moment. That's the beauty and that's the power. I think you can come to it as play, but ultimately what it is it just connects you back to your own core, and then what you do with that and how you operate then from that moment of maybe stillness that you've managed to, reach, is kind of what we're interested in. But that's, I don't know, the answer that comes to my mind for your question.
Yeah, sorry, a comment. It reminded me of a story about people who lost their memories, and sometimes people who were lost, and if a wife comes wearing the same perfume she was wearing, the memory returns to the person.
Yeah, because it's it's the closest to where your memories are kept, and there's also a lot of work that's been done with people who have Alzheimer, or scent is going back again to the future of it, this more intelligent function that it could have. Lost their sense, so yeah.
And during the COVID period, a lot of people lost smell, and those people who have had a sinus surgery, sometimes it has gone wrong and they have also lost, because all connected here. And often they have commented that they started remembering by memory. So they would eat something that was a little tart, sour, so that they could retrain
their...
because if you couldn't smell, it really affects your taste.
Sure, they're connected.
But more so, in terms of the Islamic sciences, the gateways are the offices to your understanding. So the nose is one form of the office as well, which is really interesting, because we've been speaking a lot about Venice as this interlocutor, this gateway between Europe and the Mediterranean and the Middle East and the Muslim world in particular. And then we're coming back through Scent as another form of an office, another kind of gate. Maybe we'll wrap it up through that idea.
I think that's it.
Oh, sorry.
One more.
Let her finish.
No, I'm not sure there's a question there. I think you're... it's almost a bit subliminal sometimes, these things, you know? Like you were saying, you don't know why you're attracted to it. You don't know why it speaks to you. And like I said, for me, scent spoke to me on a level that was not just intellectual as to why I'm going to spend, 20 years of my life in that area. I think it's because it really reminded me of home and something which is just sort of our lineage. Yeah.
Well, I bring the microphone there. We're also in a space which has a very strong presence of like in this.
Yeah, and I was.
Commentary.
Yeah.
It's hi. It's just a commentary on what Sara was saying, because actually, from a personal experience, after COVID, I lost a sense of smell, and until now, it's been since December 2020. Until now, I have only gained back the good smells.
Oh, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, but the good smells that is linked to memory.
Yeah.
And now that he is, he's talking about the smell of humidity and the smell of closed, the wood, all of. Sorry. Yeah, but other than the plant, the smell of a closed area, not getting enough sun, makes also a specific smell that takes back to memory as well. But definitely, this was like a big fascination for me when I couldn't get back all the smells. Until now, it's been 2 years now? Yeah, 2 years. So Sarah's about COVID, she's right.
I think there's been studies of, about people who are anosmic, who, before COVID, who just can't smell. And it can really have some serious repercussions, on their life and even, in terms of connecting with others or, or with their immediate, significant other. It can be quite debilitating. I hope it fully comes back.
Thank you, Jamal. And if we do not have any more conversations, we'll close the program for today. And we look forward to seeing you. Please follow us along on the National Pavilion of Uzbekistan to keep up to date in real time the program and what is coming. Looking forward to tomorrow. We will meet again at 2:30 here for our public talk. So we look forward to your return. Okay, wish you all a great evening. Thank you so much, Anahita.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you.